part of it when you just go to Copilot generally, you just ask something, it's looking at your entire set of all of your data, right? That's in there. But now with SharePoint, you can go to SharePoint. And there's a Copilot icon right there on your document libraries that you can click on, and that agent is focused purely on the data within that SharePoint site or that document library. So it can really narrow it down. And what they're doing is they're taking Copilot Studio components now and bringing them forward into our normal interfaces, so we don't have to go to Studio to build an agent that points at the SharePoint site. They're bringing it right to the SharePoint site for you. So that's a new thing, and I think that helps just like bring Copilot to the front, and then helps provide better responses.
Hey everyone, welcome to the IT Collab Podcast. My name is Brandon Barnes, and I'm here today with my co-host,
Nathan Taylor.
All right, Nathan, and we're joined today by a special guest, Mike Hughes. Mike Hughes is CXO of Covenant Technology Solutions, and I think it's Covenant Global.
Covenant Global, and there's two others, but we won't talk about those.
What does the X stand for? CXO.
Yeah, CXO. Yeah. Well, in my former life, what I call my last regular job, I was the chief technology officer for an 8,000 employee healthcare group. I managed 6 healthcare companies. Prior to that, I was head of IT for a $5.5 billion financial institution that was part of a Global 300. So if you want to talk about security and compliance and regulation and all that fun stuff, I lived and breathed it on a daily basis. But got out of that. I retired out of that, is what I like to say. And I took a year off and played a lot of golf, and which I haven't played golf at all this year. It's a terrible thing. So then I got pulled into Covenant, and we've done some amazing things. So
does it kind of replace the CSO, CTO, CIO,
CISO, all that stuff? Yeah. I focus a lot on, these days, I focus heavily on Microsoft security and Microsoft systems, but, work with AWS, Microsoft 365, Azure, architecture, do security audits. I've done, I think the largest company I did a security audit was Random House Publishing. I did an internal audit on them, knew more than their CISO did by the time I was done. I get all over the place, from small business to large enterprise, local to global.
That's awesome. Well, you guys had the privilege of attending Ignite, right?
We did.
Yes. Where was that?
Snowy Chicago.
Oh, Chicago.
Yeah. For 5 hours it was snowing.
But it was fun. I hadn't been to Chicago in a while, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What'd you guys learn? What'd you guys get out there?
Well, there was a lot. It is a fire hose. If you know anything about Microsoft, they like to take their content and save it for their conferences. So they used to have 3 big conferences a year. There was Build in the spring, which is their developer-focused project conference. There was Inspire in the summer, which was the partner-focused conference, and Ignite in the fall, which is the IT pro-focused conference. Inspire has kind of gone away, didn't survive COVID, any number of reasons, and they rolled a lot of the Inspire things into Ignite. And so it was really a combination of their partner and IT pro conference. And they certainly rolled up a lot of their conversations into that of like, hey, here's all the new announcements we want to make. You could tell there's a lot of stuff that's embargoed and not allowed to be talked about till the event. So they dropped a lot. But I'd say one of the ways I wanted to start, Mike, was I thought it was interesting the topics that didn't get spoken about at Ignite. There were words that I did not hear in the keynote, like dynamics, power, teams, cloud. These are words that would have had their own section of previous years. They weren't talked about. It was 3 topics that were kind of the core focus. And I bet you can guess what the first one was, Brandon.
Well,
Copilot.
This is like a drinking game. How can we do like,
I got tea.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, it was definitely Copilot. There was like 80 announcements on the first day, something like that. I mean, this long page of announcements that they had. But some real interesting things. And the other big one, I think, and it's really related, is their whole Secure First, initiative. And that is, it's really shifting, at least appears to be shifting, their mindset and the way they're approaching it. I mean, I was in one of the Server 2025 sessions, and they're talking about how, they're locking Server 2025 down now out of the gate, similar to like when you buy a firewall or a router, you have to put rules in place to allow it to move traffic.
Yep.
But they're actually, when you get a Windows PC now, it has BitLocker turned on by default. So they're doing all these security things on by default, and really, I won't say not appeasing the enterprise anymore, because a lot of times when you have to do things that are upgrades, right, you're moving forward, and then when things are more secure, they sometimes break things as you're doing an upgrade. You got to be careful when you do these things. And Microsoft in the past has really set, appeased the world and saying, we're not going to turn that stuff on. We're just making it easy for you to do your upgrades and do your things. But now they're going, nope, secure first. We're going to be turning these things on. We're letting you know, do your testing, be prepared. And that bled over into all the stuff with Copilot, all the AI, because it's all been talking about data security. And I know you guys have talked about on your podcast before, garbage in, garbage out. You got a lot of bad old data in your Microsoft 365 tenant. Copilot's going to bring that stuff to the surface. You've got to get that out. You got to use an archiving tool, to kind of get that out of the way so you can clean information, and you got to get your data and your security in place. So this whole Secure First initiative, I think there was this underlying presence of that across everything, from, AI to whatever they were talking about, servers and all of those different things. It was just present there. And that's kind of like that one of the underlying things that I felt throughout the whole thing, even though it wasn't at the top.
How would you, Mike, could you just explain a little bit more about what you do and then how it would affect your business and what you learned?
So for me personally,
Yeah.
part of what I do is go-to-market strategy. What impacts our organization as a service provider, and what impacts our customers. And when it comes to AI, when Copilot came out, they're always like, oh yeah, we want to throw Copilot. They want to throw Copilot in and run with it, license in and run with it, without really thinking about data security. Or they're the opposite in the spectrum, where it's like, we don't want to throw anything into our environment. But even though they're employees, I saw statistics recently that said, 68% of employees are using some AI system with company data, right?
Yep.
And so it's happening. And so it's like, okay, how do you help an organization utilize these new tools, learn this new skill? Because it is a new skill. Most people treat it like cert to begin with, right? So, and it's more than that. You have to learn how to interact with it like a person, essentially, and shape it. It's almost like working with a child, where you're trying to gate things and get them to do something. And then it's kind of like when they get there, it's okay. It's this interaction that you have to do. So I always tell organizations, this is a new skill. This is a new tool in your belt that you've never used before. And Microsoft in this conference, and Nathan and I went to one of the pre-day workshop, Microsoft completely changed their approach to implementing. It was in a much more simplified approach, but data security was wrapped with it. So as I go into these conferences, I'm looking for things that are, one, impacting the industry, impacting the market that I work within and the customers that I engage with, impact our service practice, because those people have got to get trained, because they're the front line. They're the ones that are talking to the customers on a daily basis when problems occur. And so all of this I take into account when I'm going to these conferences and trying to get as much out of it to bring to our team. And it affects how we go out into the world and sell things.
Right.
Yeah, I think the big focus that they really jumped into right away in the keynote, and I know from other conversations with Microsoft, is their real focus is agents. They are wanting to say, hey, we created Copilot, and yeah, you can search your email and you can have a recap meetings. Great. That's interesting. But the real power that Microsoft wants to facilitate is agents. And the idea of agents is take the power of intelligence in AI, attach it to a set of data, a set of, a line of business app or an API, and have it do things for you. And so they released 5 agents as kind of the first draft of this, but you can build your own agents inside of the AI agent, the Copilot Studio, that's now inside of the Windows 365, Microsoft 365 app, and also Teams. So the big 5 they released is an employee self-service HR and IT task simplifier. And the idea is, you integrate your Workday for your HR, you're running your company in Workday. You can create an agent in Teams or in Copilot that's tied into Workday, has intelligence from Workday, and people, instead of opening tickets with HR for everything, can go hit that agent and ask it questions and say, how do I request time off because I need paternity leave? Oh, well, you can see there's a document here that explains it. Go to this link, create your time off request, submit, and it walks people through and even facilitates sometimes those things and say, can I open that ticket for you? And so that was the first agent.
Yeah, that's the actions side of the house, right? That's the other thing that's the actions. You got the agents, and then you got the actions behind that, because we're all asking, Copilot to produce this information for us. But now what do you do with it? What can you automate within that? And actions is the next thing.
Yep. The next agent is a facilitator agent, which you'll start to see showing up in your Teams chats. And the idea is, those amazing recaps we get in meetings. Now you can get amazing recaps in your Teams chats. You ever get on one of those threads with your coworkers? By the time you jump in, it's 60 comments long, and you're like, man, I don't have 10 minutes to go read this. Facilitator will allow you to say, hey, catch me up. Tell me what's going on here, which is pretty cool. There was an interpreter agent that they demonstrated that's pretty amazing. Mike could be speaking Spanish here, and with that Teams interpreter, we would be hearing Mike's voice speaking in English, even though he was speaking in Spanish with this interpreter agent. I don't know how modified the demo was, but the demo was pretty cool. They showed somebody speaking in another language, and about 3 or 4 words in, all of a sudden you were hearing his voice, but in English instead of the language. And it was pretty wild.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
They've got a project manager agent. They've got a couple other things. So they're really pushing on agents. There's a SharePoint agent. That's one's interesting. You can go into a SharePoint site and say, hey, this site has all our sales data, has all our statements of work, has all of our pricing. Build an agent that references all this data and it answers questions for people on how to sell our products. And it'll kind of spin up an agent that knows all that data and will interact with your users off of the data in that SharePoint site. Maybe it's an HR share, or it's a finance share. Okay, tell me this data or that data. And so they're trying to kind of take AI and take it from this broad thing to be more focused on specific user requests and outcomes.
Yeah. Copilot, and so what I jumped to next is when you said SharePoint, is you now within your SharePoint site, we talk about data, garbage in, garbage out, focusing on data, right? Part of it, when you just go to Copilot generally, just ask something, it's looking at your entire set of all of your data, right? That's in there. But now with SharePoint, you can go to SharePoint, and there's a Copilot icon right there on your document libraries that you can click on. And that agent is focused purely on the data within that SharePoint site or that document library. So it can really narrow it down. And what they're doing is they're taking Copilot Studio components now and bringing them forward into our normal interfaces, so we don't have to go to Studio to build an agent that points at the SharePoint site. They're bringing it right to the SharePoint site for you. So that's a new thing, and I think that helps just like bring Copilot to the front, and then helps provide better responses.
Copilot Actions is really cool. That's the idea of scheduling Copilot prompts. So you can do things like, hey, can you recap the important emails from my mailbox every morning? So I get a quick rundown of, I got 100 emails in there, but tell me what's important. Or can you recap all the conversations I had with my boss in the last week and have that delivered to me Friday afternoon so I can review, make sure I didn't miss something. The idea is anything you could do in a Copilot query, you can now schedule, and they're going to build a lot of them. And I was talking to somebody and they're like, oh, this is like, Outlook rules on steroids for for 2025. I think that's a really interesting description of some of how you can use that Copilot actions for, is just to kind of really see that. So,
yeah.
Hey, Mike.
One thing oh, go ahead. Sorry, Brandon.
No worries. I have a question though. So I've heard a few stories, and we've had guests on the podcast where we've talked about these scenarios where you start using Copilot and employees find data they're not supposed to find, right? I think I've seen some like news articles out there. I think it popped up on my Google feed, other things. Do you guys have any scenarios where that's been, problematic?
I personally have not run into any of those particular scenarios, but like you said, I've read about them,
Right.
and it's a real thing. It is a real possibility because, and I'll talk about search for a second because this is directly related. One, Microsoft announced a new window search capability on the new PCs, that you can do Copilot on local PCs, and they brought processing power there. But back in May, Microsoft announced that they were removing natural language search from Microsoft 365. And the reason for that is they're replacing it with contextual or semantic search, I should say. Semantic search which is the search where it's related items. So if I've got barbecue, pork, recipe, those are all kind of related things. And so talking about search, if now we've got this new semantic search built into every Microsoft 365 tenant, and that's essentially what this new Windows search is semantic search. If you've got that built into there, when I ask a question, even though the question I asked may not be, if it was a natural language search, it would not pull it would pull this data that's over here to the side.
Right.
With a contextual search, if it's in the context of my question, even though I didn't ask for it specifically, now it can go over there and pull it in, even though I didn't intend for it to pull it in. So I may see things that I wasn't intending to see just the way semantic search works behind the, under the hood.
Like, I think we've even seen like some lawsuits or, stories of lawsuits for like, hey, these people got to my data that they weren't supposed to see. So be kind of interesting.
They allowed it to be there. The security hasn't changed, right? So nothing has changed from a security perspective. It's the way search has changed essentially that allows this to happen. So you're at the end of the day still responsible for the security and putting it in the right places. But the problem is we move from the file server to the cloud. Data security moved from the control of the IT department to the control of the end user, right?
Yeah.
And so if the end user puts it in the wrong place, that's not the business's fault for that to happen. It's the user's fault. They did something wrong that they shouldn't have. But going back to Microsoft's Secure First initiative, they've got this whole new approach that they're taking on data security. And one of the most extreme end of it is auto-labeling every piece of data that is created within your environment and encrypting it to employees only, right? So data security is still your responsibility, and you have to implement as an organization. And the problem is do you really want to entrust your employees to do the right thing, or do you want to put systems in place that make them do the right thing because that's the only way they can really do it?
AI is an accelerator, right? It accelerates people's access to data, their ability to generate things. And if your data is not secure, which, small business and data governance is a real challenge. So we know that's the case. AI is exposing it. It's not creating it. It's just giving us quicker access to it.
Yeah. And we've created a whole program just around this. We have our Copilot readiness program. We have a program called Fortify, which is basically it's a cybersecurity program where we've simplified cybersecurity to the point where you don't have to go learn all these things. You don't have to go learn CIS 18 and zero trust and all these different things. We've programmatized it. So it's like, do this first, do that second, do this third, do this fourth. This is how you're going to do it. And this is the result you're going to get. we're going to move your secure score. We're going to align you with CS18, and you're not even know really we're doing it. We're just doing it, right? And we offer this to customers and other managed service providers as a program. So it's a fantastic way to approach it, and you've got to simplify it, because otherwise the customer is looking at it as like, I've got to go classify millions of files, and I've got to reorganize all my data, and and that's like never going to happen. So how do you accelerate that? How do you simplify that for the customer? And you've got to really programatize it and make it easy for them. And like I said earlier, Microsoft changed their entire approach, and they're providing now new dashboards, new reporting capabilities, new analytics that actually show you the value of Copilot now. It's like how much saving your employees. There's a report for that now, or it will be in January. So they've got all these new things that they're bringing out to help customers understand see what's going on within their environment, give them visibility, understand how their employees are doing it, where data sits, what is exposed. So there's all this new stuff that is coming out that we're going to really start seeing land in January.
They added SharePoint Advanced Management is going to become a license you get with Copilot. That's going to open a lot of doors for those small businesses with Business Premium and Copilot to do some more controls there. Let's change the topics a little bit. So AI, when Satya got on stage, he had three main topics. It was AI, it was devices, and it was security. So before we leave AI, we talked a lot about Copilot, but the AI Foundry stuff and the updates to Azure Fabric were interesting to me. It's a little bit more technical than I tend to get into, but they renamed the AI Studio in Azure to AI Foundry. And I think it has 1,800 models you can access in there. And if you haven't played with it, it's amazing. Yeah.
And now you've got amazing server in there now too as a piece. That was a huge ad for that.
Huge announcement. So Fabric will now allow you to host Azure SQL natively in Fabric. And what that means is your database now can be leveraged in AI natively from the Fabric interface. So really, Microsoft's really trying to say, don't worry too much about what's happening on the back end with your data. Just get it to us, and then we'll help you leverage your data, which is really interesting. They're one lake, Azure Fabric, kind of push.
Did you notice how they actually put the Fabric F slowly over all reports? Just like it was like a back end thing. Like, what is this F here? And then all of a sudden it's like fabric.
Don't miss our branding. It's a big deal.
And so for some of us who don't know, just to kind of lay the groundwork of where this all sits in the mix, you've got Copilot, which is basically ChatGPT 4.0 under the hood with Microsoft's language model that can access your data and present things to you, right? That's the first kind of a level that we all start at. The next level up is Copilot Studio, which is now the ability for you to pick your data sources, whether it be a SharePoint site, you upload a file, or you point it at a website. You can control what the agent is looking at. So if you want to build your HR manual or your IT support services agents, you can do that very simply, and it comes with your Copilot license. But then you go up into Power BI, machine learning, all that stuff, and subsequently into the whole Fabric ecosystem, where you can use Azure AI to really do your own thing and very, very customized pieces. So there's whole hierarchy that Microsoft provides you.
Yeah. Fabric is definitely a different animal. Did they talk about that at Ignite?
Oh yeah.
There was a lot of sessions on Fabric. The stuff in the keynote was high level, but there was definitely a lot of conversation around Fabric.
Well, because we have a dev department, and I know that they've been digging into Fabric for like over a year because they saw the writing coming on the wall. So I just want to know that they talked about it. That's awesome.
Well, it used to be Microsoft was like, should you use a table DB or a NoSQL DB or a Cosmos DB or an Azure SQL? And they're like, nobody can understand any of this. Just use Fabric. We'll take care of it. Now, it's not that simple, but that's kind of the marketing, perspective is just get it in our systems. We'll handle the rest is kind of, I think, the message. So devices was the next big topic. And I was fascinated by this because it was the keynote went a different direction than I expected. Microsoft is a software company. They sell services, software, and they spent at least 30 minutes on hardware, which blew my mind. Now, they had a quick section about Copilot Plus PCs. We've talked about those before. These, PCs with 40, trillion in operations per second capable neural processing units that can run local models. So they talked about how they're going to leverage those for contextual search, consumer grade features. And hey, recall is going to be amazing if we can ever figure out how to release it and not stick our, cause a major security issue. But then they jumped into some interesting hardware. What stuck out to you on the hardware announcements, Mike?
The Microsoft Link device, which is about this big. It's about the size of an Intel NUC, a little bit thinner, right? But is a Windows 365 direct boot to and log into Windows 365. So basically, it's an operating system managed by Intune, and it will take you straight to a Windows 365 PC login.
So okay.
So $350, zero client, just for Windows 365.
All it is a portal. It's basically a dummy terminal to a virtual machine in Azure. Yeah, the Azure 365 or whatever it is.
Yeah, Windows 365 PCs is the product. So Microsoft, it's a license you Windows just add to Microsoft 365 and assign it to a user. There's a few things you have to do on the Intune side or on the networking side to kind of make it all kind of come together. But I mean, I use one all the time. Just especially when I travel with my iPad, I pop into my Windows 365 PC all the time. That's where I work out of.
I mean, this is the thin client, zero client world that's been around for years, right? We were doing thin clients with RDP.
Yep.
20 years ago, we were doing that. The nice thing about this is it's Microsoft managed. So they're providing the update. They're providing the security. There's no local software that you can interact with. So it's hardened.
Yep.
It doesn't require a third-party management platform. That's always been my complaint about all the thin client management companies is they're like, hey, we're cloud friendly, but you got to spin up a server to manage all our thin clients. This kind of world where the management layer became kind of painful. This is really clean and simple. I talked to a couple people that they're really considering some interesting form factors. Right now, this is a desktop that'll support dual monitors, and it's a little box. You plug in 2 monitors, a mouse, keyboard, your smart card, or your YubiKey. But they're talking about putting them maybe into laptops or tablets for people as well.
So I have a question, guys. Obviously, we all know that if any of us had a architectural or people that do the CAD designs, the biggest issue is their ability to see or the what I'm talking about. So
I know you're talking
performance.
Yeah, so performance and video, you need to have the big screens and the lag time and blah 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 blah. Right? And no offense to architecture people if they're listening, but it's pain, right? So of course you have an RDP server with the licenses and all the nuts and bolts. How well do you think that little guy does?
Well, I don't know. So let me talk into that specifically. I have direct experience with this because I go back to the Citrix days where I had GIS staff working off of T1. GIS stuff working on T1s with dual monitors to a Citrix environment. So I'm very familiar with this. 2 years ago, me and a coworker built in a Microsoft GCC High environment. Okay, we were actually the first people to do this. We ended up working with the team at Microsoft that writes the the RDP protocol, writes that protocol because we had to solve some problems. It was a aerospace engineering firm, consulting firm that works with some of the big boys. And we had this, they wanted to do CAD CAM in the cloud, okay, with a 3D mouse, 3-dimensional mouse. So you use the Siemens modeling software and several other different modeling softwares doing full 3D CAD CAM. Right. And we got it to work incredibly well.
Really?
Super smooth.
Through a dummy device? Like through a terminal device?
Through a terminal device.
Wow.
We found that the terminal devices were not as performant as a PC was.
Right.
So we ended up with some PCs with an NVIDIA GPU locally on them. That did help a lot, especially when you need CAD CAM, but you didn't have to go out and buy the $5,000 laptop.
Right.
You could definitely reduce your costs, but we were able to do it in a secure environment and get CAD CAM to work. So CAD CAM on virtual desktop has been done for years and it works really well. You just need to know how to configure it. And we've proven that it works well with AVD. And Microsoft recently released GPU Windows 365 PCs. So those are available now. I have not personally tested those yet, but I'm sure they will work. There's a few little settings you have to do on your local machine, that little tweaks that you have to do to help with the performance. But the thing is the more monitors you have, like I got 4 monitors here, the more monitors you have, the more upload bandwidth you need. The more pixels you have, the more upload bandwidth you need. And if more than 5% of your pixels on your screen are changing, like you're moving something, right?
Yeah.
It actually goes from one graphics mode to video graphics mode. So it's just the way the RDP protocol works. So it's just knowing how it all works. But yes, it will work. But I think in this particular case with the Link device, it's going to be more for, I'll call it the back office worker or the frontline worker versus the CAD CAM type of individual. But CAD CAM does work really, really well with ABD.
Well, it's always been a hurdle, right? Like,
well, it's just knowing how to do it, really. The technology has been around for a long time, and it's just the know-how behind it.
It's also the cost. I mean, to be honest, we all know that it's possible.
It's possible. There's definitely a cost to it, but it also depends. That goes into how you operate your business and the contracts that you have and the work that you're doing, and you build all that in. And with all this new Department of Defense CMMC regulation, there's going to be they're anticipating those costs are being built in, and you've got a lot of CAD CAM in that space. And we work in that space. We work with customers in GCC High. We've probably got a half a dozen or so projects we got going in that space right now.
Right.
So it is a thing, and it does work, and it's a cost that you factor into your business of operating your business.
Yeah. There were some other hardware announcements that were interesting. Microsoft has created their own silicon, so they showed a couple chips off. One is a hardware security module they're going to start building into all of their servers in Azure, which is interesting to see them going deeper and deeper into the silicon side. They also created their own chipset, their own chipset for doing AI that they're going to start embedding in servers. So that was interesting. Satya holding up little chips in a little plastic containers on stage and saying, "Look what we built!" The software company building chips. But the one that's really interesting to me is Azure Local, which, if you're familiar with the older product Azure Stack HCI, the idea is that you're buying servers from Dell or HPE. You're putting them on premise, and you load a software stack on them. And then you can move Azure workloads back into your data center, but manage it from Azure. And in the mid-market, it's very interesting to people, especially in a world where VMware is raising prices by 1,000 to 1,500% sometimes. Being able to have a new hardware and software orchestration layer from Azure is really, really interesting. I watched a couple videos about how that works, and they did some cool things with the new Azure Local version where you can boot from a USB stick on any hardware that's compatible. It automatically provisions the hardware. It stores the authentication tokens in Azure Key Vaults instead of having to use Active Directory, and manages it like it's pretty seamless. It's almost plug and play to run Azure Local. And I'm really interested in digging into Azure Local. Azure Stack HCI was a beast previously, but this new Azure Local version looks like they've really worked to take some of the complexity out of this solution.
Yeah, it's much smaller footprint. The devices are a lot smaller, but they're part of the family overall, just in general. So they work for certain things and they work well doing those things. But as you move up the stack, like this year they announced the ability to do Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Stack HCI. So bringing it in the data center, bringing it local. So if you've got a manufacturing facility or you've got systems that are still on premise, now you can bring AVD and replace those Citrix and VMware Horizon environments.
Yes.
There's a capability to do that. And which leads in, ties into what you were talking about, how how we got this pricing changes with Citrix and Horizon and all this stuff going on that's not making some enterprises very happy.
Yeah.
And here's, I think Microsoft can take advantage of that. I was at if you're all familiar with Nerdio, they're the kind of the front end for AVD. You really can't build or manage an AVD environment really well without that product. And I was at an enterprise thing earlier this year with them, And in the room were the CDWs and some of these big boys that are doing this project. And they're like, oh yeah, we're seeing a whole bunch of stuff. And they're talking, yes, we're doing the Azure stack. We're doing all this other stuff. And so I think this new announcement just complements that stack. Obviously, it's a rebranding, which Microsoft really likes to do, a lot of rebranding, right?
Yes.
But I think, calling it local, I think
Yes.
because
Shows
it
that
is
it's in the
local.
market selling, right? It makes it easier
And
for us to sell
people
it.
like local. They like supporting local, right? So
Yep.
this is local, and I think it's a good name for them
Me
to
too.
use. I'm excited to see how it fits into the market.
Now we just need all of our Microsoft friends who might be listening to go convince the Windows 365 Link team, for the love of God, please let us use Link with AVD. I will sell sell the wheels off of my Windows 365 Link, but it needs to support AVD. Right now it doesn't, and that's just a bummer.
Yeah.
So
Scott
please.
Manchester, if you're listening,
That's
don't
the way to name names.
Call out my name.
Yeah, my goodness. Yeah, so some interesting stuff there. But on the security front, as you mentioned, there was also some cool announcements on security. Very much, I think you also think about when you're listening to Microsoft do a keynote, they're telling you where they're focused, right? I mentioned, they didn't talk about dynamics or power. That's not their focus this year. It's AI, it's devices, and it's security. And on the security front, I thought you could really tell that they were responding to two things. One was there was a distinct stack of those announcements that were aimed directly at the CrowdStrike incident. They're very much wanting to say, that's not happening again. So they had this scrolling screen on the keynote that was like dozens and dozens of changes to Windows that they're making to make sure that the CrowdStrike incident doesn't happen again. So a lot of resiliency discussions, changing the way AV accesses the kernel. They announced the new hot patch for Windows for Enterprise, which I instantly said, great. Microsoft can crash those enterprise machines quicker without a reboot. This is great. This is beautiful.
It does work though, Nathan. It's just not for you.
Oh. No, well, yeah. So number one, I don't tend to have enterprise licenses, so I won't get hot patch. And if I did, they're just going to pay to test their buggy updates on the enterprise without a reboot. So sorry, little dated, but Microsoft's had some rough patches this year. So
yeah. So instead of rebooting your PC server every month, right? It's every quarter now, right? The way the hot patching works. And and related to that, just talking about server real quick, they in the server 2025 session that I was in, they actually showed on screen upgrades from all the way from 2012 all the way to 2022. There's a direct path. So all those of you out there with still 2012 in your environment, there is direct path to 2025.
Nice.
It's awesome.
You're going to have someone come to me and be like, we're on 2012 still. Is there a direct path to 2025?
No. Nothing's changed in technology in 15 years. What are you talking about?
It was pretty cool. They had accelerated demos, screens of doing it, but I captured some screens on it. It was pretty cool.
That's cool. They also announced some new administrative protections, which is great. I'm really thrilled to see Microsoft starting to say, hey, the world where so many businesses live, where everybody runs around with admin rights, that's the default, right? That's how most businesses run. They're starting to get more granular with the admin rights, where people have to put in their smart key or their UB key to install updates, to install software, and really trying to give administrators an ability to say, hey, before they install that virus, they got to go grab their UB key and plug it in and type in their code. And like that idea, let's take the automatic click yes to the UAC prompt and change that. So it's less, makes it harder for some of those issues.
Yeah,
so,
it's a just-in-time style access is what it is, and they've had this in Intune for a little while now, where you can throw a configuration, the basic layout, so the user doesn't have to be a local administrator, but you have those people, right, that want that local administrator rights, but we all know that's a bad thing. But now there's the ability for them to request administrative rights and get consent for a period of time to provide to do those things. And it's a smart move. It's kind of like when they put lapse into Intune here this last year.
Yeah.
Now it's a click of a button in an Intune configuration policy, and all of your PCs no longer have the same local administrator password. Thank you very much.
Why would that be a problem?
Yeah,
I have no idea.
No big deal. Just plain text, and just keep your local admins on plain text. It's fine. Well,
they also announced a big hacking event where they're going to have a $4 billion bucket of money to fund people. It's about a year away. They're giving people a lot of lead time, but they're hoping to get some really good hackers cranking away on Windows, which I'm thrilled to hear. I think it's a great move. I think it's very smart to say, hey, we're going to be the ones paying the people to find bugs, not the threat actors. I think it's very smart, and I'm excited to see that. So that was a cool announcement.
That's great. We are buddy up against time, gentlemen.
Okay.
Mike, we'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, I'd love to.
We actually might talk about what you do for a living or something. I don't know. But, I know you guys went to Ignite, and one of the, it's great to catch up and hear some of the cool things that are out there, right? And everyone kind of sees and hears their own stuff. My boss, just I wanted to test and see if he's actually listening to this podcast, but he saw, who's the head of Microsoft? Sorry, I'm tripping. I'm missing his name. Satya, or one of the other people, wore this like hoodie / jacket on one of his like presentations, and it freaked him out. So I bought him one for Christmas. I'm gonna give it to him and see how he likes it. This would be fun.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
you got anything else for Mike?
Well, thanks for coming on, Mike. I always respect your understanding of the ecosystem as well as anybody in the industry. You're always got your thumb on what's going on, and it's a lot of fun to go to Ignite and spend some time with you and just get to learn from Microsoft. There's a ton of other information. They made a lot of partner announcements and that sort of stuff. We're probably not going to get into that here, but it was cool to go. And I mean, it's just exciting to see what Microsoft's building. We are all in this because we like the new toys, right? These are new digital toys for us to play with in 2025.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, you've got being there in person is a completely different experience, with the 10,000 plus people that were there. But it's, I go for the networking and connections, like connecting with Nathan.
Yeah.
You don't get to see him in person very often. So it's just fun to connect and sit down and have an adult beverage and just shoot the breeze and then talk about all this stuff, like a couple of geeks do. And it's, we just have a good time.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's essentially what we're trying to do here too, Mike, right? And just minus the beer, I guess we'd had that at a different time, but
that's why I keep a refrigerator right there.
It is 5 o'clock. It is 5 o'clock on the East Coast right now.
Yeah, it is. Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, guys, for having me on.
Yeah, Mike, for sure. Well, please keep us in mind. Maybe in a few months we'll have you back on and talk more.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah.
For our listeners, please, if you listen to Mike, we have a lot of Mike, Mike followers on LinkedIn, everything. So if you're out there, please don't forget to like, subscribe, do something. Just pay attention. We're trying to put our name out there. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.